Welcome back to Two Nates on Sports. My name is Nathan Sitting with me, as always, is my co-host, Nathan Kwan. Today we're going to be recapping the March Madness and what's happened so far, especially with the Sweet 16, and oh, how sweet it was. We'll also talk about the NBA and the historic night of scoring, specifically from Mr. Booker, first name Devin. And then we'll touch a bit on the NFL as well as the World Baseball Classic. Nathan Kwan, take it away.
Yeah, so first I want to just mention last night's Wisconsin-Florida game was absolutely nuts. It was a game back and forth. Midway through the second half, I thought Florida had that game in hand. They were up double digits. Kevon Allen was just going off. He finished with 35 points, but he was just hitting every shot in sight, hitting step-back jumpers. And I was watching UCLA against Kentucky and watched the finish of that one, and I switched it over. And Florida took command, so I was like, okay, I'm going to do something else pretty soon because this game's pretty much over. And then next thing I know, the four seniors from Wisconsin they didn't want their careers to end, so they just came back. Bronson Koenig hit a bunch of threes, Nigel Hayes, and the final play of regulation, Wisconsin had cut the lead to 3. And Zach Showalter catches the ball and just a 1-foot runner from the wing, and it drains right through the net for a 3. The Garden's going crazy. I'm thinking, why did he shoot a running like 2-pointer? Like, that's a 2. There's no way that's a 3. Like, I've never seen a runner 3-pointer for the tie before. But then like they showed the replay and he just elevated behind the 3-point line, like hung in midair and just threw it in. And I was like, this is the most ridiculous shot I've ever seen.
And I was like, and I honestly missed that shot because I was busy doing my taxes and I stepped away for a bit because I thought too that this game was over because I remember it being like they were up, the Florida being up 5 with a minute and a half to go, and I was like, okay, this might be over. And I was like, okay, there's no way they can top that right there, right? You know,
no. And the best part of it also was that after he hit the shot, he kind of looked over at Aaron Rodgers, who was in this crowd. And obviously Aaron Rodgers plays for the Packers. And so he's rooting Wisconsin all the way. And he did the discount double check championship belt. And Aaron Rodgers saw that and got a kick out of that. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then Florida misses the lob. They try to throw it down Christian Laettner style, and it got picked off. And so it went to overtime. And then in overtime, it started off really weird. They got fouled on like the tip off.
Yeah.
And then they spent like 10 minutes reviewing it, or what it felt like 10 minutes. And I was like, what's going on? And so Florida took the lead. But then Wisconsin, pretty much from there, they took over. They took a 80-75 lead with a minute 9 to go. And so I thought, okay, this is over. Like, Florida's blown it. To force overtime on that shot, and then just, I guess they're just tired, and Kevon Allen is just tired as well, and great effort. But the 4 seniors came through for Wisconsin. But
oh man, let me recap to you like what happened in overtime. So in overtime, so basically at the very end there, like they put like their 60% free throw shooter for Wisconsin on the line. They're all just like holding their breath. There's 4 seconds left and it's tied, and he makes both, and like you could see like the sigh of relief on like the entire Wisconsin bench and the entire Wisconsin team, and you saw like the panic on the Florida team, and like you hear like the announcers sort of like hyping up like, hey, these Florida guards, they're pretty fast, so like it's not impossible for them to get down the floor in 4 seconds to score to maybe tie it, but you're just thinking like, oh, he's just saying that just to keep us interested. And then literally Chiozza just like goes down the floor and he lofts up a prayer while running from like just beyond the 3-point arc, and it goes in. Just the craziest thing, like just the craziest bookend to an amazing game. And I just like, everyone loses their mind, and it's just far and away, this might be one of the best March Madness games I've ever seen, straight up. And you just feel for like this Wisconsin team, and like these quite a few of these players were on that Wisconsin team that made it to the finals and lost to Duke in a closely contested match, and they just wanted another shot at it, and they came so close to it too. And you gotta feel for these players, especially also like Bronson Koenig, who who I mean, like who for the longest time had been the leader of that team, and like he started having a cramped foot, like cramping up of his leg, and so they had to take him out and substitute him with someone that was like who could play and be like keep up with their speed, and just unfortunately it wasn't enough. But wow.
Yeah, and I had watched throughout that overtime. Nigel Hayes kept getting fouled, and he's not a good free throw shooter, and he was not hitting his free throws. And for him to hit those two in crunch time with 4 seconds to go, you thought like he won the game for them. But and I mean that Chiozza three is almost identical to the three that forced overtime. So I guess you could say it was kind of poetic justice that you had a prayer force overtime and a prayer that won in overtime.
Like Hollywood couldn't have wrote it better, you know? It's just like it was so on point. Like if you were Florida and you were writing that, like that's how you would want to write that story for this game.
Yeah, and I think in a tournament that's been kind of lacking for drama, especially like late game buzzer beater type of action, I think this was clearly the best game of the tournament so far. And hopefully with the Elite Eight, Final Four, and the championship game coming up, we can get more of that drama. But that was just incredible to watch last night.
Far away the best game of this tournament so far, and I can't imagine any of the other games topping it.
Yeah, so they're in the East region. Florida's going to play the biggest surprise of this tournament, I'd say, South Carolina. I picked them to lose in the first round to Marquette, and have they proved me wrong. They have gotten to the Elite Eight for the first time in program history, but Frank Martin...
Yeah, pretty much in program history, the first time they made it to the Elite Eight, and like the first time they've won a game in the tournament in a while. So, I mean, good on them.
Yeah, Frank Martin, the former coach of Kansas State, and he led the Wildcats to an Elite Eight when he was there, but he fell out with the players there, and they had so many transfers. And I guess he's adjusted his coaching style because the players that on South Carolina have clearly bought into his philosophy. They're one of the best defensive teams in the country, and they showed that last night, spanking Baylor by 20 points. This game against Florida is going to be a war of attrition. These are the two of the best defensive teams in the country. I'm going to pick Florida to go on just because I think they have more firepower offensively, but I mean, just everything South Carolina has done to get here in upsetting Duke and beating Baylor, I think that program has come a long ways, and credit to Frank Martin for leading that revival.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And I mean, like, and as much as we like to crap on Baylor, I mean, like, I know I had Baylor losing in like the second round to SMU, and I mean, like, at the end of the day, like, as much as like this was an upset, like, I mean, like, it's not that surprising that like Baylor would like choke in terms of just like not living up to its potential. But at the same time, like this is definitely an incredible run by this South Carolina team that like in recent memory, like the biggest thing that they had to their name was having someone play in the NBA. But that was Ronaldo Balkman, I think. It was something like that. It sounded like Rolando Blackman, but it wasn't. Former Dallas great. But yeah, no, I mean, like, this is absolutely amazing run by them, and two SEC teams facing off against each other. I mean, like, we're so used to the SEC putting out like amazing football teams, but now it looks like they're moving more towards basketball, and that gets my goat. I know for sure that does, but that being said, like I do agree 100% that this is going to be a war of attrition. I'm actually going to go with South Carolina on this, just because at the end of the day, I think this is a team of destiny, and they're just going to fulfill it. They're going to fulfill it so hard, you know. And
yeah, props to the SEC teams, basketball teams, South Carolina making this miracle run, and of course Kentucky and Florida are the two powerhouses in that conference year in and year out in basketball. But chanting SEC, there's no other conference that chants that. Like, I don't know who you're competing with. So, I mean, I guess that's just a Southern pride that they have. But, I mean, nobody's really competing.
It's definitely Southern pride. Absolutely. Like, they get proud of being Southern down there for, among many things, this being like the least offensive.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the South region. So last night was a marquee matchup between NBA draft point guards in Lonzo Ball for UCLA and De'Aaron Fox for Kentucky. And this round went to Fox. So Kentucky, it was a close game throughout the first half, but then the second half, The Wildcats defensively just turned it up a notch, and De'Aaron Fox was absolutely incredible. He had 39 points, which was the most ever by a Kentucky player in a tournament since Tayshaun Prince, I believe, in like 2002. And there's been a lot of great players that have gone through Kentucky since then. And so Fox was just incredible getting to the free throw line. His straight line speed from one end of the floor to the other, they're comparing him on the broadcast to John Wall, and I can see that. Like, he is NBA ready with that amount of athleticism and speed. He can cause a lot of NBA defenses problems. I think the thing for him is he's just got to develop a more consistent jump shot. But what a show he put on last night.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, for a much ballyhooed battle between the point guards with monosyllabic nouns for the last name, it was sort of surprising, like, how one-sided it was towards De'Aaron Fox. Like, I mean, like, going into this, like, like you pointed out, like, he did struggle a lot with his jump shot, but, like, he was also someone that had, like, a very strong basketball IQ and obviously the speed, but he wasn't exactly known as like the primary scorer on that team. Like, it was supposed to be Malik Monk, but he completely took over. And I mean, like, you look on the other side and you see Lonzo Ball, who, like, I know a lot of the story has been revolving around Lonzo Ball's dad, but I mean, like, Lonzo Ball for all intents and purposes has been like an absolutely like amazing player and has just completely turned around this UCLA team. Obviously not single-handedly necessarily, but I mean, like a lot of the turnaround is due to him. It's his appearance on there. And while I wouldn't say he didn't show up, he wasn't at all able to keep pace with De'Aaron Fox. And it's just absolutely incredible. It was just sort of like, well, I don't think this necessarily like hurts Lonzo Ball's stock all that much. I mean, like, you got to think that like De'Aaron Fox has now put himself in conversation to possibly be on the verge of joining near top 3 potential for this upcoming draft.
The other game in the South region was North Carolina beating Butler. I think this sets up a great matchup between North Carolina, which got all the way to the championship game and lost on that buzzer-beating 3 to Villanova last year. They return a lot of upperclassmen, and Joel Berry scored 26 last night, Justin Jackson. So in a matchup between those two blue bloods, I'm going to go Kentucky. I think the way they defended against UCLA's offense last night in the second half was impressive, and I think their athleticism can cause North Carolina problems, and the Tar Heels have struggled to guard at times this tournament. So I'm going to go with a minor upset. I'll go Kentucky in the South region final.
Yeah, same here. I'm going to stick with Kentucky. I mean, like, I had Kentucky winning the entire tournament, so I mean, might as well. I mean, like, granted, like, a lot of credit to Justin Jackson on and the work the rest of that team has been doing to make it up back to the Elite Eight and like sort of just like obviously keep up with the standards that of UNC basketball tradition. But this UK team has already beaten this UNC team before. I mean, like, and UK is like pretty much like on fire. Like, I have like this team is like playing the best basketball they played all season. I mean, like, and you can obviously point to the fact that they finally beat this UCLA team that they actually lost to earlier in the season. But yeah, I'm going with De'Aaron Fox and Malik Monk, as well as Bam Adebayo, to carry this team over and make it to the Final Four and probably win the entire thing.
Yeah, so in the Midwest, Kansas is the top seed, and boy, have they looked good the last 2 games. I was watching that Michigan State game against them last Sunday in the second round, and down the stretch, it was like a close game with about 8 minutes to go, and then the Jayhawks just turned it on a different level, and Michigan State couldn't keep up, and KU ended up winning by 20, but they're led by Frank Mason, the senior guard, and Devontae Graham. Those 2 senior guards have carried this team. Obviously, they had the super freshman and Josh Jackson, who's I think has elevated his draft stock to potentially be the number 1 overall pick. But they are firing on all cylinders right now. I think it's going to be tough for Oregon to keep up. So I'm going to go Kansas in that region. But Oregon, props for them for making it to the Elite Eight despite losing Chris Boucher, one of their outstanding big men. They escaped with a win over Michigan, but I think this region is going to be all about Kansas and those 2 senior guards getting that team to the Final Four.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Like, Josh Jackson has really turned it on this tournament. I mean, like, going back to that Michigan State game, it seemed like Miles Bridges might actually end up like outplaying Josh Jackson, at least according to that first half, especially when you consider like Miles Bridges ended up having to come out of the game for a bit and then come back in due to some injury. at the end of the day, like Josh Jackson just like took it to a completely different level, and just like while Miles Bridges seemed to be able to keep up a little bit at first, like he just like Josh Jackson was just like an extra 2 steps ahead of him, and it was absolutely incredible. I mean, can't like there's no way. It's hard for me to see how Oregon can get past this team, but I definitely think it's going to set up that matchup between Kansas and Kentucky and sort of fulfill the prophecy put forth by that Coca-Cola commercial that's been playing every game of this tournament so far.
Yes, and also those wonderful Capital One commercials as well that played basically every 20 seconds.
Yeah, well, I mean, in all fairness, I think they decided to pick like the 2 most popular basketball programs, and it's just like, oh, it turns out, that they will end up making
stakes on a plane, man.
Absolutely.
Okay, so in the final region, the West, Gonzaga, the top seed, got by West Virginia, and so Gonzaga's never made it to the Final Four. They're going to play against Xavier, the number 11 seed, who has a lot of people didn't even have them getting out of the first round. They've shocked the world with their run so far this tournament. But I'm going to go Gonzaga. I just think this is their time. They are a experienced team. They throw the ball inside more than any other team with Karnowski and Collins. And Nigel Williams-Goss, the point guard, is a leader for that team. So I'm going to go Gonzaga. But what a job done by Chris Mack and Xavier. They lost one of their best players in Edwin Summer for the season earlier this year, and they've just kind of rallied and regrouped and made a strong showing this tournament.
Definitely, for sure. I'm going with Gonzaga as well. Definitely kudos to Xavier. I mean, like we were talking about how South Carolina might be the biggest surprise of this tournament, but I mean, like you only have to look to Xavier to see like the other arguable case here, and just like how they've upset both this like in a Florida State team that had 2 NBA talents, one of which has already declared and has signed with an agent in Jonathan Isaac, and then you also have Dwayne Bacon, who should be a little bit under radar or a dark horse there, but then also upsetting like a very strong Arizona team that had someone in like Lauri Markkanen, who's like sort of like an old age Dirk, but he's like 19, but at the same time he's like just a team with like NBA talent and a history of tradition of like at least like making it to the tournament and doing pretty well. They were able to upset them, and I mean, I know Xavier usually like makes it to the tournament like every year, but like this is like the first time they've ever like in recent memory, to me at least, that they've made like a real significant run. And like even though I don't think they're gonna upset Gonzaga on this, because I just think Gonzaga has too much talent to overcome, as well as they're just like working too well as a team together. This is Xavier team should definitely be proud of the work they've put in, and I think it's going to be at least a closer game than a lot of people might expect.
Yeah, and Chris Mack, that guy is going to get a lot of big programs going after him this year. That guy can coach. He's done so much to build that program up, and his in-game coaching decisions are outstanding as well. So we'll see if Xavier can hold on to their coach. I'm sure there's going to be a big program or two going after him. Yeah, but let's move on to the NBA. My Houston Rockets finished off a perfect week, 3-0. So they won both games in their home with Denver. The first game was a defensive struggle, so the Nuggets strategically took away the 3-pointers, and the Rockets responded by scoring 60 points in the paint. James Harden finished off his 4th consecutive triple-double with 40, 10, and 10. And Nene had a dunk that turned back the clock. Monday night, it was more of an offensive game. So the Rockets and Nuggets, they put up the 2 of the top scoring teams, and they played like it this game. They put up over 120. The Rockets actually blew a late lead, and Denver looked like that they were going to pull off the win. But James Harden scampered 90 feet in 4 seconds to hit the game-winning layup. He finished with 39, 11, and 7. I'm banging the MVP drum again, but that is an MVP level performance. And last night he had a career high 17 assists, 38 points, and the Rockets reached 50 wins this year with 10 games to play. If you would have offered me 50 wins at the beginning of the year, I would have taken that in a heartbeat. And to get there with 10 games to play shows just how far this team has come coming off last year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know how you can't say at this point that James Harden's the MVP of the league. And like you said, I mean, it's a big surprise, like how much this team has turned around. Like everyone was making fun of Mike D'Antoni being hired as the coach, and how like losing Dwight Howard while he was definitely like on the decline phase in his career, like losing Dwight Howard would be a huge blow to the Rockets, but they've now actually improved by losing him, and a lot of that has to do with just the fact that, like, I mean, obviously adding Eric Gordon and Lou Williams has helped, but I mean, a lot of it is just like the fact that James Harden has become like one of the most complete players, like offensively, not defensively, in all fairness, but offensively. And in all honesty, offense is like 75% of the game in basketball. Like defense is more like, either way, James Harden has my vote. If I could vote, I would vote for James Harden.
Yeah, and we talked about the notion of help last week, but I'm going to address the defense. Steph Curry has won it 2 straight years. Does he really lock down guys defensively? I mean, like,
no.
Russell Westbrook, as great as he does on offense, he takes plays defensively off. And sure, if you watch just the highlight reels, he'll come weak side and get blocks and steals. But I mean, you can find clips of him just falling asleep on defense as well. It's just the notion, oh, he shouldn't win. Oh, he doesn't play defense. Like, look at who's won in the past, right? Did Steve Nash play any defense?
Right. Dirk Nowitzki's, I think, like the best like comparison, really. I mean, it's just like Dirk is like one of the greatest offensive players of all time, but he always had this perception of being like bad on defense. But I mean, like he like when he put forth effort, especially during that NBA Finals season, when he's paired with a strong and interior presence, like, I mean, like he can be a decent enough defensive. He's not someone that people can pick on.
Yeah, and so Harden's also going to be the highest scoring assist champion since Tiny Nate Archibald in 1972-73. So he leads the league in assists, getting his teammates involved, getting his teammates better shots, I think is a requirement, in my opinion, to become the MVP. But there's 10 games left. They're 6 up on the Jazz for the 3 seed. So as we've mentioned, that's pretty much locked up. They're looking to get playoff ready. They have a week upcoming that they're certainly going to get a test. They play Oklahoma City on Sunday, then they play Golden State at home, then they play at Portland and at Golden State. So those are 4 potential playoff teams with Portland in the hunt for the 8th seed. But it's going to be a good test coming up, and I think they just need to stay healthy. Ryan Anderson sprained his ankle last night, so we can't have any of those minor injuries going into the playoffs. But they're looking in a good position, and we'll just see who they play. So right now, 6th is Oklahoma City. If it's between them and the Grizzlies, I'd actually rather play the Thunder just because the Grizzlies have a matchup problem inside with Marc Gasol. But your Mavs are, it seems, out of it.
They're out of it, and yet they somehow decide to like mess with me. I feel like so basically for the past like 2 weeks they've been having trouble like keeping Nerlens Noel on the floor, but like they like at the same time like they go from like getting blown out by the Philadelphia 76ers to then like beating like the LA Clippers and Washington Wizards. And it's just frustrating because like this team should be tanking. Like if we're getting blown out by the 76ers, then we clearly don't have enough talent to at least make a run to the championship, let alone be like a consistent like playoff team. So I mean, I don't understand like this whole like, and yet somehow they keep bouncing back and forth. And like right now we're at the 10th overall spot in the draft, and like I mean like if we could like lose a little bit more, we should be able to get someone that like could help right away. But I mean, it's neither here nor there at this point. I mean, that being said, it's nice to see this team sort of like show its potential going forward with their core. And so far, they've actually been like a very strong team when Nerlens Noel starts. I believe they're 8-3 when Nerlens Noel plays in the game, and they're 7-0 when Nerlens Noel gets more than 20 minutes of playing time. And so, I mean, the answer is clear, and it's that Nerlens Noel is a very good fit on this team. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they ended up signing him to a max contract in the offseason. I mean, obviously, barring any sort of medical concerns that might pop up what they're going to have to do going forward is to try focusing on like trying to see if whether or not Seth Curry or Harrison Barnes can become more consistent scorers, and if one of them can at least develop into a decent primary scoring option for the future. So this team is what it is, and they need to start building more talent, especially as Dirk Nowitzki transitions into retirement and might only play one more year after this one. So we'll see.
Yeah, as far as general NBA news, the biggest kind of talking point this week was topic of NBA players resting despite being healthy. So the past 2 weeks, I guess, on ABC's Saturday primetime game, you had the resting Warriors against the resting Spurs. And then last week, you had Cleveland resting its big three against the Clippers in a primetime game. And so that was a big talking point. So Adam Silver actually sent a memo apparently to all the NBA teams saying that they would be punished if they continue to rest players without giving the league notice. My thoughts on this are, I guess I could go both ways. So in one way, as an NBA player, and you've heard like former players talk about this, like you've signed up yourself to be a professional athlete. And with that comes the responsibility of traveling to arenas on back-to-backs and getting your body ready with a short period of time. And the concept of, like I can't play, like I need a rest. Like there is modern medicine to back this up to prolong your career, but you as a professional athlete, you as a player should want to play every single game. There shouldn't be any poor us, like we have to go from one city to another city and get in at 3 a.m. and play. Like you're getting paid millions of dollars to play a game. And fans are spending their hard-earned money buying tickets to a Cavaliers game. If you're in the Western Conference, you only see the Cavs once a year. And if you really like LeBron James, you only get one chance to see him. And you splurge your money for that ticket and he rests when he's healthy. I mean, that's not good for the fans. But on the other hand, I also think that the NBA can't really do anything about this. Like teams have the right to make decisions on their players that they feel is best for them long term, right? And I get the revenue aspect, like you want advertisers to get their money's worth because nobody watches a Cleveland Clippers game when the big three for Cleveland is resting, right? And so I guess you could do something where you fine teams, but even then, like then you get into the notion of like, is that player really injured? Like how injured are they? Like could they play? And so then you get into a little gray area. I mean, I think they can do a little bit better with the scheduling, where like if you have a primetime game, you can give like both teams like a couple days off beforehand so that they're less likely to rest, or like don't put them on prime time on the 8th day of a 13-day road trip or something like that. But it's a complicated issue.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, like, and this whole thing started more with the San Antonio Spurs, but like at least then, like, it made sense for the San Antonio Spurs to like rest their starters, because like their starters were super old. Like, I mean, like we were talking about like at least like 2011, 2012 San Antonio Spurs that had like Tony Parker, Tim Duncan, and Manu Ginobili as their core. And like the thing about that is that these players were all like over 30. Some in their mid 30s at the time, and it at the very least it made sense then. And even then, those San Antonio Spurs teams would end up like winning games or almost winning games against good teams because they had a deep bench, and they were able to sort of justify it that way. Versus like Golden State, which has like Klay Thompson, Steph Curry, and like Draymond Green, who are all still in the prime of their careers. Like they definitely and only of which like Steph Curry has had like injury history before, but like he hasn't, like when is the last time that he's been like seriously injured? You know, I mean, like these guys, and not only that, like only of those guys, only Draymond Green has like a really like physical game, like, you know. So it's to me it's like a little bit silly that like a team like Golden State would be thinking that they need to rest their players, especially to some extent, like when those players should be like saying like, hey, I want to play every game, you know. So that's my take on it. But at the same time, like, I mean, it's not going to stop until like the NBA enacts some sort of like rule, like maybe like there's a like you can only rest like a certain amount of players that like make a certain amount of money or something like that. Like you can't like rest like 2 max players or something like that. I'm not too sure. I mean, do you have like any specific ideas on like how to fix?
Well, I mean, I think the only way that they'll feel it is if you hit them where it hurts the most is in the pocketbook. So if you say like you sign a $20 million contract and you play 3/4 of the games, granted, like if you get hurt at like a knee injury that you need to have surgery, like obviously that won't count against you, but you miss a fourth of the games, you miss a fourth of your pay, right? And that's I guess a way to do it. There's some talk about like lengthening the season out. So like what they did with the All-Star break was they made it a week since players complained that they didn't get enough rest around that time if they were participating in the All-Star activities. I don't think that's the solution. You already have NBA games at the beginning of the year. It's starting in like end of October, and they want to start it like mid-October. Like nobody cares about basketball unless you're a diehard until usually around Christmas, because football is still going on until like end of the year for every team, and then you have the playoffs in January and February. But to say that that's going to increase your revenue because you have potential less resting of players, I don't think you're going to have that, because the average fan is not going to attend a basketball game when the baseball playoffs are going on and when football's in midseason swing. So the other solution, of course, which they're never going to do, is to reduce the number of games. So you naturally have more rest days in the middle of the season, and you don't have those back-to-backs and 4 games in 5 nights, that sort of thing. But to take money away from owners' pockets, that's never going to happen. So, I mean, that's the most logical solution, in my opinion, but that's something that they're never going to do. Yeah, and another note, nobody ever complains when players rest in baseball, right? Like, it's like, oh, I waited this whole year to see Mike Trout, and Mike Trout's not playing today. Like, there's no like outrage at that. So I don't understand NBA. It's like, oh my God, LeBron's not playing. Rage.
Well, in all fairness, I mean, they do play more games in baseball than they do basketball, and like you have, instead of just like they only come to town like for one day and then leave, like they come to town for a series, and so they're there for like three days, and so like, I mean, granted, like there's always that chance that like you go the wrong day, that they end up resting Mike Trout or something like that. But I mean, like if you really, really, really wanted to see Mike Trout, then maybe you could like try going and getting a ticket to another game after that. But I mean, yeah, I mean, at the same time, I think it is a bit of a double standard when it comes to basketball and versus baseball, because especially since like with basketball, I mean, like you don't have as many players as you do with baseball, and so there's much more of a demand on the if you lose one of your star players on the basketball team, like that will drastically alter like how well your team plays, versus like on baseball, like yeah, I mean, like if you lose like someone like Mike Trout, then like yeah, that's definitely going to like really hurt. But if you're a team like the Chicago Cubs, and like you lose like Chris Bryant, well, you have like Anthony Rizzo and all this like depth in like your farm teams and whatnot that can come in and sort of like fill in for like at least a bit. So yeah, that I think that there's a bit of that double standard going on as well. One more thing we have to talk about, the crazy performance last night by one Devin Booker, borderline Kobe Bryant-esque, in my opinion. Do you think so?
Yeah, I watched the highlights of that. It was definitely a impressive performance, putting up 70 against the Celtics. I do say Phoenix was actively seeking shots for him late in the game, and they were behind for the most part, and so it wasn't a winning effort. So I got to knock off some points for that. But I mean, putting up 70 is putting up 70. That's impressive, no matter how you get it, what the situation was. And you know, Boston, they never really double teamed him. I guess the game was in hand, so they weren't really too concerned about him going off. And so it was pretty much single coverage for the most part. And late in the game, they kept fouling him, which I didn't really understand. I would think with a big lead, you just kind of let him shoot and, you know, get the rebound and stuff. They kept fouling him and putting him on the line. But he's a lone bright spot in a very, very bad team in Phoenix, and they're going to be going to the draft again this year, hoping to add more talent to that team.
Oh, definitely, yeah. And it's going to be interesting to see like what they end up doing with Eric Bledsoe, whether or not they try trading him for futures, or if they if they're able to work something out to sort of like keep him on. I mean, he's someone that's struggled a lot with injuries, and like he's still somewhat in the prime of his career and still could contribute to a strong winning team. So if they want to do that, then they kind of have to decide this offseason, especially sometime at the draft.
Do you see more records falling in the future in the NBA? Because the way the game's played right now is just so fast paced, and the way they call on the perimeter every like tic tac foul, and you can't hand check, and they protect players at the rim. Like we saw in the All-Star game this year. Granted, it's an All-Star game that like nobody cares about, but just like the way they play is like there's little to no defense a lot of the time, and then you have players that come in and just shoot threes at a much higher clip than they used to. Like, do you see more records falling? Because Booker, granted, he's a great player. He's not even an all-star yet, and he put up 70, right? Like, do you see like Klay Thompson has gone close. He's gotten 60 in 3 quarters, and he's like sat out the whole 4th quarter, right? Like, is this an age where we could see more and more of these scoring records fall?
I think I think it's possible. I mean, like granted, Devin Booker, I think is going to be a star in this league, and I think he's arguably already there at this point. But I mean, at the same time, like it's going to be interesting going forward because at the same time, like the game itself has changed from like back, especially when back in like the 90s when it was a lot of it was a physical game. Versus now which is more like sort of like focused on like the scoring portion of it. I mean, what's your take?
Yeah, I mean, I think prime candidates, I would say, would be Thompson and Curry. Those guys, when they're on fire, they can just hit any shot imaginable. And it doesn't matter if you double team them, they'll just shoot over the top of it. And they shoot so high clip from the free throw line, and them playing on the same team together, they can get open looks for each other. I think if it's any player right now in the league, it's those two that could potentially get 70 or even like get close to Kobe Bryant's 81. I don't think we'll ever see 100, but every time somebody puts up one of these numbers, like you think that, maybe we'll get there one day. Okay, let's move on to the NFL.
So in NFL news, the Cowboys right now are trying to get rid of Tony Romo's contract by getting rid of Tony Romo. They're trying to see if they can extract any sort of extra value out of him by getting some sort of like pick and trying to get a team to trade for him. Specifically, it's right now between Denver and Houston, if there is anything. But right now, the biggest news coming out is that Romo would be interested in signing more so with the Texans than he would with the Broncos. And the reason this is interesting is because for the longest time, even since during the regular season, the rumor was that Romo would if he were to be released, would sign with the Denver Broncos and see if he can try to replicate what Peyton Manning was able to do with the Broncos back in 2015. The fact that he might actually go to the is fairly significant. I mean, obviously, for people that are fans of the Texans as well as the Texans organization itself, the fact that he might be willing to join them and really help jumpstart that offense that has, for the longest time, struggled to find a quarterback is outside of that 1 year with Matt Schaub. Like, it is going to be real interesting. I mean, like, I don't know about you, but like if I'm a Houston Texans fan, I'd be salivating at the idea of like Romo getting the ball to DeAndre Hopkins like every play. What's your take?
Yeah, the report was that he would only consider joining the Texans at this point, or he would retire, which I thought was very interesting. I mean, I think Romo will definitely, if he's healthy, and that's a big if, right? Because he hasn't been healthy the last couple of years, and he has had a career full of injury issues. So the Texans, if he's healthy, I think he certainly will help the offense. For me, as I said last week, if there's no other team that's really pining for his services, then why do you need to give up anything to get him, right? Like, you just wait for Dallas to release him. They're not going to just keep him on the roster. They re-signed Kellen Moore to be their backup. They have Dak Prescott in Trent as their starter. So I would just wait it out. And I think Romo personally, I don't know him and I haven't like followed his personal life, but I think wanting to come to Houston, it's close to home. He's lived in Dallas. Kind of also just, I think, sticking it to Dallas I mean, I think he understands the situation with moving on to Prescott in the future, but I think personally he's a competitor, right? And he believes he can still play, and he probably believes he can still be a starting quarterback and be effective and win a Super Bowl. And Dallas has kind of chosen to not go with him anymore. And I think if he were to win in Houston, I think it would mean a lot to him sticking it to Kerry Jones and how this whole situation has turned out. That's just my take.
Fair enough. Yeah, definitely.
So let's move on to some baseball. So first, the World Baseball Classic.
For sure, definitely. Big news being that USA has walked away as the winner.
Yeah, so they beat Puerto Rico in the final 8-0. They had 3 wins that they had to get in a row. So they were in an elimination game against Dominican Republic, which I thought they would lose, but they ended up coming through there. And then they beat Japan, which I thought they would lose again, and they beat them 2-1. And Puerto Rico, which was undefeated, they trounced them. Marcus Stroman had a no-hitter through 6 innings, and he was named the MVP, but he was outstanding. He gave only 1 hit before he was removed, and he had to choose between the U.S. and Puerto Rico at the beginning of the World Baseball Classic, and he put his allegiance with the U.S. and ended up working out for him. Props to the U.S. players, notably for the Astros, Luke Gregerson, who picked up a couple of saves. Alex Bregman was a shortstop. I wish he would have gotten more playing time, but he got a championship ring as well. So hopefully for those 2 players, the first of many championships this year for them.
Sure. Yeah, let's go with that. But yeah, also shout out to Jonathan Lucroy and Sam Dyson, who play for the Rangers. They were able to get they were part of that U.S. team as well. Also shout out to former Ranger Ian Kinsler, who had a great game in the finals against Puerto Rico. But also, I think one of the other big stories from this tournament, or at least one of the funnier clips, and it's one that we'll link in the doobly-doo, is Jurickson Profar winning not top 10 plays for the week because while playing for the Netherlands, and so the Netherlands team is made up of also the people that are in the ABC Islands in the Caribbean, and so that would include Curacao, which is where Profar is from. Profar was able to get a hit in his game against Puerto Rico, and so he gets a hit, but he's not paying attention, and so he starts celebrating, thinking he drove in the winning run. But unfortunately for him, he was off the bag when Yadier Molina caught the throw from the outfield, and so he was able to throw the ball over to the first baseman, who tags out Jurickson Profar, and the Netherlands ends up losing the game by 1 run. Hopefully that's a learning experience for Jurickson Profar. I mean, he's still pretty young; he's in his mid-20s, but not a good heads-up play on his part.
Yeah, because the Netherlands hit a home run, I believe, on the very next batter, right? And so that would have been an extra run automatically on the board if he hadn't had been caught off first base. So those Cardinals keep getting those Rangers, man. His 2011 will never die.
You.
Yeah, the Rangers, man. What's with them showboating? They're just learning bad habits from Rougned Odor, dude.
Well, at least I would say they're learning bad habits from Jose Bautista. So if anything, blame it on him. But yeah, no, I mean, like, the Rangers are going to Ranger. You know, they are who we thought they were. We let them off the hook. But yeah, no, I mean, like, I'm still going to love this team. We'll talk about it a bit more during our MLB previews, which will be coming up shortly. We'll talk about it a bit more. But let's also talk about some spring training news, especially with the Texas Rangers. So with the Rangers themselves, they got some good news from Tyson Ross this week. He faced live batting practice on Wednesday, and now is actually a week ahead of schedule. So that should help solidify the back end of that starting rotation. Hopefully Tyson Ross can find his form that he had prior to being injured. That not the end of the world, and also they were able to re-sign Robinson Chirinos, who's right now the backup catcher behind Lucroy, to an extension, and so he's going to be it buys out his last year of arbitration at $2.25 million in 2018, and then he has an option, I believe, of either $2.375 million in 2019 or $100,000 buyout. And so, I mean, at the end of the day, that's a solid investment in someone that's going to be your backup catcher, who actually does offer a valuable veteran presence as well. I mean, he was the starting catcher during that 2015 season where they almost upset the Toronto Blue Jays in the first round of the playoffs. But I mean, kudos on them. And at least if they're not able to re-sign Jonathan Lucroy long term, or if they feel like they that like paying a lot for a catcher that's going to be over 30 for the next few years is going to be a bad idea, then they can look elsewhere. But it also looks like AJ Griffin has locked up the bottom of the rotation spot, either number 4 or number 5 for right now, with 5 2/3 scoreless innings in a minor league outing on Thursday. Dylan G unfortunately had a bad outing this week, and that looks like he's gonna probably stay in the minors. At least he gets $2 million guaranteed if he gets $2 million guaranteed if he makes the team. So I mean, he's going to be hoping against hope if they decide to keep him. But at the end of the day, doesn't look too good. But it also looks like the Rangers are going to be going with a short bench. But Drew Robinson right now, who at first was looking to be like the utility infielder and outfielder, he is in the middle of a slump right now, and it looks like they're going to be stacking up on extra relievers and seeing if any of the relievers can step up in the place of Jake Dykman's spot, especially with the fact that they're probably going to be going with a four-man rotation until Cashner can get ready. But yeah, that pretty much wraps it up with the spring training news for the Rangers. What about the Astros?
Yeah, so the Astros named Dallas Keuchel as their opening day starting pitcher for the 3rd straight year, so no surprise there. Other rotation news, Colin McHugh came into spring training camp with a dead arm, and so he's been slow in getting ready for the season. He's only going to make his first major league spring start this upcoming week, and so it's likely he's probably going to start the year on the DL. So that means the 5th starter race between Mike Fiers and Joe Musgrove, both of them will probably get a starting rotation spot at the start of the year. And also in the bullpen, that means Brad Peacock will probably get the long reliever spot that the loser of that 5th starter race would have gotten. So McHugh is still not ready for the season. Other news, they sent down AJ Reed, Colin Moran, Teoscar Hernandez, and Tyler White to AAA. Nothing unexpected there. Those guys had good springs hitting the ball, but just so much depth on this roster. If I were them, I would start raking AAA because any injury, any struggle by a veteran at the major league roster, if they're playing well, they're going to come up and contribute. And I think all those players have a role on this team just in case they are needed at some point this year. But other than that, the Astros are just getting ready. I think Alex Bregman, who's been off for 3 weeks, not getting much at bats with Team USA, I think he's going to be in every single spring training game from now on just to get ready for the season. Jose Altuve as well, since he's come back. And obviously Carlos Correa is in his midseason form already. So that's it from Astros camp. And so let's get to our final shout outs. So for me, first U.S. men's national team last night, they beat Honduras 6-0 in San Jose in their CONCACAF World Cup qualifier. So a much needed win. They had lost the first 2, and then they fired their head coach Jurgen Klinsmann, replaced him with Bruce Arena, and so far so good for them. And a heavily laden roster of MLS players. Clint Dempsey had a hat trick. Christian Pulisic had a goal. Michael Bradley had a goal, as well as Sebastian Lletget in his first ever start for the U.S. So they're off to a good start, and they have another game at Panama on Tuesday night. And so they have 3 points through 3 games. The top 2 automatically qualify for Russia, and then the 3rd place team gets into a playoff potentially. So hopefully they've turned it around. They certainly need to qualify for the World Cup. And we mentioned
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and definitely, the sooner that this team can turn things around and sort of not as much as like people like to crap on Jurgen Klinsmann, he was able to get this. He was able to recruit some great talents from overseas, which is weird to say for a national team, but I mean that's how it works in FIFA. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, hopefully Bruce Arenas can turn it around and get them qualified for Russia next year. which should make for an interesting storyline going in. What with everything that's been happening between Russia and the U.S. in terms of foreign relations, but we'll see. Also, I would like to shout out to The Undertaker, again, as a WWE fan, a wrestling fan, and WWE fan as well. The Undertaker is one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. He's also from Texas, and he's also from Central Texas. He just celebrated his 52nd birthday this year, and this past week, as well as this past week, he ended up going to visit the Longhorns football team to give a pep talk there. While I guess preparing to face Roman Reigns in what might be his final match at WrestleMania. I mean, he most famously had 21 WrestleMania wins in a row until 2014, and so basically that was 21 years of him being one of the best wrestlers best wrestlers in the company and winning his wrestling matches. Kudos to him, and hopefully that can rub off on Tom Herman's group.
Yeah, shout out to JJ Watt. He turned 28 years old this past week, so happy birthday, JJ Watt. And shout out to Adam Jones. He had a sensational catch in the game against the Dominican Republic. He robbed his Baltimore Orioles teammate, Manny Machado. So shout out to him, and shout out to Texas women's basketball. So they got all the way to the Sweet 16, but they lost to Stanford. And so they had a good season, made it to the top 10 at some point, but they're going home. At least they didn't lose to UConn this time around.
This is true. Definitely that.
Yeah, and I think that about wraps it up for this week. We do have 2 special podcasts coming up next week. We have our Major League Baseball preview for 2017. We have an American League podcast as well as a National League podcast. And we're joined by Evan Tenenbaum to break down every single team in Major League Baseball, all 30, as well as pick our playoff teams from each division as well as the wild cards. And so look out for that. Those special podcasts coming in the middle of the week, as well as regular podcasts next Saturday. Tell you guys to visit our website at twnatesonsports.com. Go like our Facebook page at 2NatesOnSports. We're trying to accumulate those likes, so please invite your friends and put a comment, what you liked, what you didn't like, suggestions for new topics on the show. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and like us there, as well as subscribe to iTunes, Google Play Music, as well as Stitcher, and leave a comment and a review there.
Well, I mean, also shout out to our own Nathan Kwan. He's going to be going to Japan next week in order to go scout Japanese baseball, right?
Oh, yeah, totally. And also probably more likely eat a lot of food. And I'll give you a full report when I get back. But
sounds good.
Yeah, Evan Tenenbaum will be in for me next week.
Cool. We'll talk to you later. Have fun in Japan. Have a safe trip. Talk to you when you get back.
Yeah, thank you so much. Talk to you guys later.